I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is UN Insider.
Coming up.
Day after day, we are witnessing the deadly consequences of inaction.
Urgent calls for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas as fighting intensifies and the flow of humanitarian aid slows severely.
Most of the situations in which peacekeeping operations are involved are becoming increasingly dynamic. We cannot take for granted any given situation.
Maintaining peace and security in a changing world, a conversation on the evolving role of UN peacekeepers. And an event steeped in culture. Diplomats celebrate one of the world's most popular beverages. Next.
The fighting between Israel and Hamas and the desperate humanitarian crisis topped the UN Security Council agenda this week. Famine has taken hold in parts of the Palestinian territory, and hundreds of thousands have left Rafah looking for safety as Israel continues its push to destroy Hamas.
800,000 people have been displaced from Rafah to Mawasi, Khan Yunis, and Deir Bala amid daily IDF airstrikes in Rafah, killing dozens of Palestinians. Hamas has continued to fire rockets indiscriminately from Gaza towards Israel. These events have had a significant impact on humanitarian operations and access.
A lack of supplies and concerns about security forced the UN to suspend food distribution in Rafah this week. Gaza's hospitals are also struggling. Officials say humanitarian operations could be on the verge of total collapse.
The
current humanitarian disaster in Gaza is inconceivable. The occupation of the Rafah border crossing has seriously hindered access for humanitarian aid. Humanitarian supplies from Jordan to Gaza have been blocked and sabotaged. Humanitarian workers and UN personnel are confronted with multiple obstacles and even risks to their lives. This is unacceptable. Land transportation is key to a large-scale access for humanitarian goods. There is no substitute for it. Israel should effectively comply with its obligations under international law and international humanitarian law by immediately opening up all land crossings and ensuring the supply of food, medicine, fuel, and other basic necessities.
The International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor is seeking arrest warrants for Hamas leaders and Israeli government officials. They're accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Nothing on earth can justify willfully depriving human beings, including women and children, babies, the old and the young, of the basic necessities required for life. Nothing on earth can justify hostage taking or the targeting and killing of civilians. The independent judges of this International Criminal Court are the sole arbiters as to whether the necessary standard for the issuance of warrants of arrest have been met.
From the Security Council to the briefing room and beyond, Shudija is monitoring the latest developments inside the UN. Dija.
Yes, Elaine, this week we commemorated the 7th edition of Protection of Civilians in Conflict Week. And this year holds special significance as it marks the 25th anniversary of the Security Council's consideration of protection of civilians as an item on its agenda, as well as the 75th anniversary of the Geneva Conventions. Security Council on the 21st of May held an open debate on this issue. During the meeting, Joyce Misuya, Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs gave some appalling numbers.
In total, the United Nations alone recorded more than 33,000 civilian deaths in armed conflict last year, a staggering number, particularly given that the actual figures are likely higher, and a horrific 72% increase compared with the previous year.
Almost every speaker, when talking about protection of civilians, they mentioned about Gaza.
Gaza.
However, there was one speaker from the United Nations, Ms. Alice Wairinu Nderitu, Under-Secretary General, Special Advisor to the Secretary General on the Prevention of Genocide. During her remarks, she did not mention the word Gaza even once. And why? Her job is to make early warnings and make recommendations to Security Council by bringing to their attention potential situations that could result in genocide and on actions to prevent or halt genocide. So that...
As I said, I think her remarks were clear. If you have any questions about what was in and what was not in, I would suggest you contact her office.
I sent inquiries to her office as the spokesperson instructed. No reply yet. Another big story this week is the helicopter crash that led to the death of Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi and Foreign Minister Hussein Amir Abdullahian. In the UN, mourning also took place. In Security Council, at the request of Russia, China, and Algeria, Council members have observed a minute of silence in remembrance of the loss of lives in that crash. Also, UN headquarters lowered its flag by request of the mission of Iran on 21st of May. And this gesture drew criticism from some US politicians. But if you know the UN, here is a flag code and regulations. In that regulations, Article 5 gives detailed rules of lowering UN flags. Number 1 rule is, upon the death of a head of state or head of government of a member state, the United Nations flag will be flown at half-mast at the United Nations headquarters. So, actually, as long as Iran is a member state, UN will act on its regulations. And by the way, this is a multilateral organization. UN doesn't necessarily need to reflect some member states' policy, unless the regulations are changed.
The lowering of the flag, the UN flag for President Raisi, who orders that?
It's not an order. It was done at the request of the permanent mission of Iran. It traditionally, when a sitting when a head of state dies in office, the flags are lowered if the mission so requests.
And one last thing, you still remember the floating dock US has built in Gaza? Hear what President Biden said during his State of the Union speech.
I'm directing the US military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza that can receive large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. No U.S. boots will be on the ground. A temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day. And Israel must do its part.
And here is what happened. The first 5 days since the inauguration of the floating dock, UNWFP managed to have about 26 trucks loading food from the dock. However, 11 of them ended up being looted by hungry Gazans.
On Friday, there were about 10 trucks that made it. On Saturday, there were 16 trucks that left the floating pier. But 11 of those trucks never made it to the warehouse. Crowds had stopped the trucks at various points along the way. There was, what I think I would refer to as self-distribution.
So, 15 trucks for 5 days, that is massive. Even U.S. hoped to initially transport 500 tons of aid per day via the pier and scale up as the time goes on. But for first 5 days, only 569 tons in total. And that's all for this week from me. Elaine.
Shudija, thanks. Let's take a look at some of the other issues on the UN's agenda.
Now is the time to unleash Africa's peace power. We need to strengthen Africa's peace leadership on the continent itself and on the global stage.
Secretary General Antonio Guterres is calling for strengthening Africa's role in global peace building. Guterres says that includes having permanent African representation on the Security Council. For a second time in less than a month, the Security Council has rejected a draft resolution on outer space security. China supported and co-sponsored the latest measure and called its failure deeply regrettable.
The recent voting results at the Security Council on the 2 draft resolutions on outer space security indicate that parties do have different understandings and views on this issue. It will take some long-term efforts to build consensus. When it comes to the governance of space, much remains to be done.
UN officials are calling on governments to take a more holistic approach to migration policy that upholds human dignity. They say progress has faltered with forced migration now at its highest levels.
Millions are displaced by the ravages of climate change, facing compounding vulnerabilities along migration routes. This underscores the urgent need for a paradigm shift in terms of how we approach migration.
Coming up,
we have an increasingly high number of conflicts, and where the nature of conflict themselves is evolving very fast. So we need to adapt.
UN Insider.
UN peacekeepers were first deployed in 1948. Since then, more than 2 million people have contributed to peacekeeping missions. More than 70,000 people are currently serving as peacekeepers. Maintaining peace and security is one of the founding principles of the United Nations. Every day, UN peacekeepers work to build and protect that peace. For some, that means placing themselves in conflict zones around the world. In January, a UN peacekeeper and several civilians were killed when their vehicle was ambushed in the disputed territory between Sudan and South Sudan.
Many injured were just laying at this place, and we managed to get all of the injured and inside this APC. This was the APC that we were in on that day. And this back side of the APC, this was the place where we just made the injured civilians sit. This center place was the place where our brother Sipai Tariq, we had just made him sit, because at that moment we still thought that we could save him. I told the driver of the vehicle, because the fire was coming, there was a lot of gunshots. So I told my driver to just move out of the danger zone, as the APC driver was taking the APC out of the danger zone. And I was running just inside the APC. So as I was running, I got 2 bullets from the direction in which I was running. So one bullet was stopped by this flak jacket that I'm wearing, and the other bullet just went through me.
I was taken first to Indian headquarters, where I was given first aid, and then I was flown to level 2 hospital, which was run by Ghana, and for there I was given treatment.
How are you?
I spent nearly 2 months in treatment, and the 2 months were quite long and difficult. And during my my time over there during my treatment, and the biggest motivating factor for me was my family. Now that I'm here with my family, with my daughter, with my wife, my mother, everyone, so every day is a blessing, every day is a bonus. And considering the fact that I have to go back after 1.5 months, 2 months, I'm really excited, to be very honest, because I'm going to a place where all of this happened, and to see that place after the storm, after everything has passed, at the place where so many people lost their lives. I got injured, my fellow peacekeeper lost his life. The biggest driving factor for me would be to complete the mission with the people that always have my back.
UN peacekeepers are currently deployed in 11 operations around the world. Their role is constantly evolving, and the force is adapting to meet the needs of a changing world. Each May, their contributions are highlighted for the International Day of UN Peacekeepers. I sat down with Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Undersecretary General for Peace Operations. Undersecretary General Lacroix, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
The theme for this year's International Day of UN Peacekeepers is Fit for the Future, Building Better Together. Can you tell us more about the message behind it?
We are in a world that is uncertain, where we have an increasingly high number of conflicts, and where the nature of conflict themselves is evolving very fast. So we need to adapt, and we need to work together with our partners, with our member states, not only to make what we do better, the peacekeeping operation better, but also to work towards building peace and durable peace.
This day is also about recognizing, honoring, and thanking the people who put their lives on the line in these very difficult situations around the world. I know you traveled to South Sudan a few months ago. Do you have the sense that these peacekeepers realize the importance of their job more now than ever?
Well, I think that the fact that those peacekeepers, the civilians, the military, the police, continue to protect civilians and to try to build peace, and also protect and defend ceasefire in very challenging and difficult circumstances. I think this is really commendable, and that is why it's critically important to pay tribute to them, as well as those peacekeepers who made the ultimate sacrifice serving the UN.
You said so yourself, and we all know that there are more conflicts around the world these days, and very tense situations increasing. How is that impacting current peacekeeping missions?
I think that what is really impacting our peacekeeping mission is, first and foremost, that we have a more divided international community. And the UN, and particularly the UN's role in peace and security, is only as effective and as strong as the unity and commitment of our member states is. And of course, this is something that applies to peacekeeping operations. We need a stronger and more united membership, not only to support peacekeeping operation, but also, and perhaps more importantly so, to support political efforts towards finding durable solution to this crisis.
The Secretary General outlined a new agenda for peace ahead of the Summit of the Future. How do UN peacekeepers fit into that picture?
Well, the new agenda for peace, as far as peace operations are concerned, says a number of things which are very important. First of all, it says that those operations need, as I was indicated earlier, more united and committed support from member states. Number two, that the mandates that are given to peacekeeping operations need to be focused and prioritized, because peacekeeping is not a magic wand. It never has solved conflict by itself. Peacekeeping is a tool that needs to be put at the service of a collective set of efforts to solve crisis. So mandates need to be prioritized. The number 3 message is that those efforts that are currently ongoing to improve and adapt peacekeeping on safety and security and digital technologies and increasing the role of women in peacekeeping, planning, performance, all of this needs to continue and even go further what we currently do. I think the number 4 message is that we need to organize ourselves as a system to better address some of the critical drivers of conflict, such as the role of transnational criminal activities or global terrorism. And the 5th message is about peace enforcement. Peacekeeping is only relevant when it is based on an agreement between the parties, a ceasefire or a more detailed and substantive political agreement. If it's just about sending international troops or forces into a conflict without any kind of political agreement, then it's peace enforcement. Peace enforcement is war. It's not something that the Blue Helmet can do. It's something that others should be doing. And this is why the New Agenda for Peace says that the peace enforcement operation carried out by non-UN entities must be better supported.
There has been a big push in recent years to increase the number of women in peacekeeping operations. I know that is a priority. Can you talk about some of the qualities and assets that women bring in different situations?
Well, first of all, we owe it to the communities that we're serving and supporting, because those communities by definition are, 50% women and men, and we need to be reflective. Peacekeeping operation need to be reflective of that reality. We believe that peacekeeping with more women is more effective peacekeeping because it enhances our capacity to build trust, particularly build trust with the communities. And we're seeing that very clearly when we have more women in our uniform components, but also with the civilians. So it's a different way and a more effective one of building trust with communities that are often vulnerable and even traumatized by conflict.
China is the second largest contributor financially to UN peacekeeping operations, about 2,000 personnel on the ground as we speak. Can you talk about China's role and its significance in the big picture?
Yes, China's role is very, very significant and also very constructive and helpful when it comes not only to supporting peacekeeping through financial support, even with some voluntary funding, which are highly appreciated, but also through the men and women, Chinese men and women who are serving in many peacekeeping operations with a high level of professionalism and distinction. But what we also appreciate is the support by China to many initiatives aimed at improving the effectiveness of peacekeeping. And we just mentioned the leading role of China when it comes to safety and security of our peacekeepers, which is critically important. China has been pioneering a Security Council resolution on that topic and is leading a so-called group of friends of safety and security of peacekeepers.
How has the role of peacekeeping evolved and changed over the last 76 years? And what new challenges do you face right now?
I think it's important to highlight that peacekeeping has been dramatically evolving over the last decades, and the models of peacekeeping have been diversifying. But I think we will have to diversify further and to look at not only new models of peace operation, depending on how the various situations are, but also new ways of doing all things. In other words, if we were called today to monitor a ceasefire, then I think how we would do it would be very different from 50 years ago when some of these peacekeeping operations that we still have were created or were adapted.
Under Secretary General, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up.
Tea has indeed played an important role in promoting harmony within diversity.
UN Insider.
Modern vitality, born of ancient civilizations. Asia exemplifies diversity in its best sense and welcomes changes at the fastest pace. Asia Today brings you the headlines from the most populous continent, puts in focus politics, economies, and faces, and takes you on a tour of the sights from the region and beyond.
It's a simple recipe. Just add hot water to the leaves of a particular plant, and you have one of the world's most popular beverages, tea. The brew originated thousands of years ago in China. And this week, China's UN mission celebrated the drink in honor of International Tea Day. Jody Jacobs has the details.
An event steeped in friendship and tea, as the Chinese mission hosts International Tea Day.
For thousands of years, tea has traveled along the Silk Road and maritime route to reach people around the world. Tea cultures from various countries, while sharing the same roots, have deeply integrated with their own customs and traditions. Just like this year's theme, Tea for Harmony, suggests tea has indeed played an important role in promoting harmony within diversity.
And no more was that harmony within diversity showcased than here, as ambassadors from all over the world shared in the joys of tea.
Although we can come far by way of enhanced working standards, we have much more to do. Think about it, my dear friends. Drinking tea promotes social interaction. Sharing tea provides an opportunity for individuals to come together. And that's what sometimes we do here in the Delegates Lounge. It facilitates conversation. Let's have a chat over a cup of tea. It encourages inclusivity. Communal tea drinking can bring people together. When it also fosters equal footing. The very act of sharing a cup of tea is typically egalitarian, isn't it?
While the exact place and time of when tea was first consumed is unknown, legend has it that a Chinese emperor first discovered tea some 5,000 years ago. And since then, the practice of consuming tea has spread around the world. So there's no surprise that there is a dedicated day to the world's most consumed beverage after water.
China has like a really long period of time of tea culture, so we invent different type of tea like black tea, green tea, oolong, and green tea is one of the, I would say, special one because this have less producing processes compared to other teas like black tea and oolong, because black tea and oolong usually go through a little bit like yeast processes, which is more friendly to your stomach because tea contains like caffeine as like coffee.
In 2023, China produced more tea than anywhere else in the world, retaining its badge as the largest tea producer. Globally, the tea market is valued at around $122 billion and expected to grow to over $160 billion by 2028. Jody Jacobs, CGTN, New York.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN Insider.